Well, hello everyone. I'm Chuck Johnson with Summit Comedy, and you're watching the Chuck Drop. This is episode 20. Holy shit. 20 weeks of this. I started this 20 weeks ago just as a little bit of boredom to try and do some little entertainment on the side, I guess, to keep me busy during the COVID. And we're 20 weeks in, just like that. Today's the 26th of October. I have a very special guest, and let's just jump right to it. My guest today has been seen on Showtime, Last Comic Standing, and is best known for his regular appearances on the syndicated Bob and Tom radio show. Please welcome to the Check Drop, Mr. COSTAKI ECONOMOPOULOS.
Yay!
What's up, Kostaki?
Hey, Chuck. How are you, man?
I am good, man. Oh, it's so good to see you. It's been a while.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So have you been just as bored as me, hanging out?
I have the opposite problem. It's funny. I talked to some of my buddies, and they're bored, and they're home, and they have all this time on their hands. I have a toddler, so I have I've never been busier. I've never had less time to myself because there's no school, there's no babysitters, there's no preschool, there's no nothing. So it's been an interesting few months for me. Okay. That's for sure.
Well, that's exciting though. So do you have one or two children?
We have two.
Okay, all right. Because I knew you were married at one time to another comedian, and Caroline Ray, right?
Not married, but yes. You got the basic premise. Yeah.
Got it.
Yes.
You were together and wrote some jokes together and had a child.
That's right. That kid is now 12, and we have her half of the time. Okay. And there's a 2-year-old that we have all of the time. So nice. we have 1.4 or 5.
Okay, but isn't that nice to have this downtime now that you're, you said you're obviously watching the child all the time. So, but isn't, normally you're on the road. So this is kind of cool during these formative years that you can kind of hang out with the toddler.
Yes, it's both. It's an incredible challenge because I don't have enough time to do all the things professionally that I would like to do. And yet it's also amazing and glorious, and the kid is hilarious and adorable and fun. And so it's all of that at the same time. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So have you done any live appearances during this mess, or are you just kind of hanging out with your child?
I have not. I said no to a couple things. Several things were canceled. Several things were postponed. I haven't gone yet. I like the idea of it, but I don't think I'm ready yet.
Is it because of the child, maybe? Like you don't want to bring back anything to the family?
Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely. And even sort of the broader notion of I'm not sure I'm ready to draw people together to be in a crowd on purpose. I'm not sure that's a good idea.
Is it like you don't want something to happen on your watch? That's what Chad Daniels was saying at one time. I don't want anything to happen on my watch. So.
Right. I do want to feel like I'm part of the solution and not part of the problem. And what might happen is in a year or 2 or 10, we look back and go, we were way too cautious about some of the things along the way. I hope that's true, but right now I think it's better to be cautious, and I'm going to wait.
I sure hope it's not 10 years. Holy shit.
No, I mean, looking back.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
We can look back on the one weird year that ended fantastically and everything was fine after that. Let's write it that way.
Yeah, because I can't imagine booking virtual comedy for 9.5 more years.
Can't imagine doing virtual comedy for that way.
Have you done the Zoom comedy shows? Have you done any of that?
A little bit. I did one of the big Nowhere Comedy Club shows, which was great. A lot of my family and friends and people were there, and it was a super cool experience. I did it in May, and it'll be something that it's sort of, for me, I hope it's like an earmark of one crazy, year.
Right. You only did it once.
I only did it once. And it's way better than expected. I mean, people say, it's like, do you put a laugh track in? No, it's interactive. It actually works way better than people think that it would.
Yeah, I think if it's set up right, like if you have some kind of interaction with the audience, whatever the audience may be, whether it's 10 people or 100, I think it can still work. I've been selling them on the concept of like, if you're gonna do a live show with Summit Comedy, our goal is to give you an A+ show every time. And in considering if Zoom is the next best thing, we're gonna try for a solid B+. So,
right.
Because everybody knows that it's not going to be as good as a live show. So if you go into that knowing that, hey, we're going to do the best we can to make this work, and the comedians are into it, and it makes
and we've come a long way as a culture in terms of accepting this as a form.
Right.
In May it was still new, and there were a couple times I could hear people during the show like talking to each other, like, I remember when he did this joke, blah blah, and you can hear it. It's part of the audio that we're all hearing because people don't even understand the form yet. So I think we're past some of that. People have a little more clue about how some of this works, and it's not bad. It's way less good than a live comedy show. There's something very magical about that, but it is also way better than expected.
Right. And some comedians haven't even jumped on board yet. And comedians that are watching and or listening, I implore you to jump into this, because obviously the COVID's not going away anytime soon. And you got at least probably another 3 to 6 months of, before the floodgates open back up into the real world. So
I've enjoyed doing the offshoots of things that are a little bit like that. I mean, we've been doing our podcast in this form on Zoom. We do every Monday night, 7:30 on my Facebook page. We do a live version, and then it becomes the podcast later. The sound quality is actually really good through this sort of recording. And I host like a thing on Wednesday nights. I do a thing called 50 Toast, which is, again, it's my Facebook fan page. It's live for an hour. I've had Jimmy Pardo and Christy Lee and Ron Sexton. It's been really cool. I did a thing about 3 or 4 years ago now in New York called 50 Lunches, which is basically just an excuse for me to get out of the house and go see a friend once a week.
Okay.
And so I just turned it into the virtual. It's the best thing I ever did. I highly recommend this when the world is somewhat normal again, because some of the most interesting people in the world. You just don't end up with them very often. And that's how I felt in New York as a father. I was like, I know some of the smartest, funniest, most creative characters ever. I just never see them anymore.
Yeah.
So I went and found them. It was fun. So anyway, we're doing the virtual version of that, and that's been great. No one has to go anywhere. You get to talk to a friend for an hour. It's been fun.
It's just a good way to catch up, and I love it. So speaking of that, you and I got started around the same time in the comedy business. I know you went to school in Georgia. Is that where you're from originally?
Yeah, I'm here now.
Okay.
I grew up in this house that I'm visiting for an extended period right now.
Okay.
I basically, from high school on, I was in this house in Marietta, Kennesaw area. And then I went to the University of Georgia, and then I stayed at the University of Georgia. They gave me some money to go to grad school, so I stayed and got my master's in political science. And during that time, I was an open micer, and we built a little thing called the Amateur Comedians Club at the University of Georgia. Okay. And we would run around and yell at people in the streets at bus stops and tell them to come see our shows. Actually, I literally bought a bullhorn once, and we did a sandwich board once just to embrace the ridiculousness of it. And we would charge $1 just so we could pay for the flyers for the next show in 2 weeks. And it was a great place to be terrible. As you know, the learning curve for a new comedian is pretty fucking steep.
Right.
So it was nice to have a safe place to be, terrible for a while.
Yeah. Comedian Derek Blackman, can you see this on the screen? It says, Kostaki was on my bucket list to open for, and now that bucket has a hole in it.
A couple years, Derek. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So when did you graduate grad school?
I finished grad school in the summer of '93.
Okay.
And by like the first month or two of '94, I was on the road pretty much full time.
Okay.
Now in that era, what the folks might not remember or know is in that time the clubs were full weeks. It was very typical for a club to be open Tuesday to Sunday or Monday to Saturday or something. And I would book 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row. I would just go to Tulsa and then up to Minneapolis and then Indianapolis and then Raleigh. And then I would just pack my car. I was, early 20s. You just fucking go. And,
right.
Nowadays, most clubs are just open 2 or 3 nights.
Yeah.
So it's a different beast. But in those days, when you went on the road, you went on the road. You were gone for a while.
Yeah, well, and that reminds me, like when I first started, I started with the Comedy Zone, fresh out of college myself, and I was in '95. So here's the story that I mentioned before we came on air. So the other day, I was wearing just some pants. You know, you had those articles of clothing that you just wear outside, and when you're
Just
working
some
in the
pants.
yard.
That's good. You've come a long way from the pandemic. I'm wearing pants now.
Yeah, we're just it's my outside, little jogger pants when you're out like raking leaves or some shit. And I looked at these pants. I was like, man, I've had these forever. And I was like, you know what? I got these pants from COSTAKI ECONOMOPOULOS.
No way.
I shit you not that you bought me a jump, like a running tracksuit. It was a shirt and pants. I don't have the shirt anymore, but I do have the pants. For a Christmas present through the Comedy Zone. And I still have it to this day. I swear to God, I should have brought it into the podcast.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and they fit great, and
I love it.
So it's a gift that keeps on giving. And I was like, that's when I said, you know what? These came from Kostaki. It's like, I got to reach out to him.
It's going to be like 25 years ago.
Dude, yeah, it was 95. So, yeah, that's exactly when it was.
Crazy.
Just under 25. I think it was the Christmas present of 95. So you're like the old greasing of the wheels with the agent. And but you know what? I remember you and a couple other comics that were always good for like good gifts. Not for bribing per se, but we did have a lot of work with the Comedy Zone when I was working with them. And
well, I was in Atlanta. I mean, you were right. You were, pretty much
Charlotte. Yeah, so
8-hour drive in every direction from me. There was a Comedy Zone gig somewhere.
Right. So we would, I'd always hook you up. And I was like, well, the option with me and Hef were always like, hey, well, we're going to book the funny people, but if you give us a nice present, too, it's kind of it's kind of a no-brainer.
That's hilarious. I don't remember that at all. That's really funny to hear that.
So you were doing everything right. I guess you took a good marketing class.
I guess so. Here's another thing the civilians won't believe. In the old days, the new comedians today, they get a YouTube clip and they just click and they email it. In the old days, you'd have to send a package with a VHS tape and a paper bio and a headshot. And it was like this giant thing. Literally this room, it's the bonus room of my mom's house. I would lay out, first of all, you have to sweat to get a tape that you want to send out. That's the hardest thing. But then you finally get one, and then you go and duplicate it. You make 45 of them. And then you spend 3 or 4 days addressing things that you found in the newspaper. I think there was a newspaper of comedy clubs that was called Just for Laughs or something.
Yeah, I don't know if that was it, but I do remember that too.
The Punchline or something. In the back of it, it had a list of like all the clubs in the country with their phone numbers. Yes. You call, you get the addresses, you mail tapes all over the place. And then it would turn into 4 gigs, 45 tapes.
If you were lucky.
If you're lucky, and hopefully those gigs you did over and over again, and then those grew into another thing, and then another 6 months you got a better tape that you were embarrassed you sent the prior one, then you send that tape, and
you would have to also pay $25 to have it viewed at some places.
Oh, that I didn't do. I'm not guilty of having ever done that.
That was one of the, I don't want to say scams, because scams is a tough word.
That was a little newer. Like when I was an open micer, that didn't really happen yet. That came along later, I think.
Let's say it was an investment. It wasn't my deal, but when I started with said company, when I first started in the business, I just thought it was funny that you had to put $25 in, and then I'd have to watch them all, and I didn't make any of that money. And then I remember asking the owner at the time, Brad Greenberg, I go, hey, I got to sit and watch all these, and half of them are just purely shit. So
of course.
I was like, this is brutal. And he's like, hey, you got to mine for these diamonds, these comedy diamonds. So I negotiated, and me and Hef did, like, hey, we're getting $5 each from each one of these, at least, if we're going to watch these. So, and that's true story. And then we would collect said VHS tapes of the worst ones, and if it made the top 10 in the stack. And we had some just gems, and I wish we still had those. But,
I've seen some of those with the guy in his own basement, and he sets up a thing. And some of them are so bad. Now, let me tell you a story that you'll enjoy on your side of the desk. Now, as comics, we always heard people hate watching tapes, and no one watches the tapes. And when they do watch the tapes, they watch them for like 5 seconds. They're like, fuck this guy. And we were always bitter about that as comics, that was the nature of the process. And comedy bookers, all you gotta do is watch a few tapes. Stop being so whiny. People are out there struggling and trying to be creative, and you guys won't even blah, blah, blah. Cut to whatever it was, 15 years later. I'm at the Acme Comedy Company in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Lewis Lee's one of my heroes. He's been great to me all these years. He's got this wall of VHS tapes. And one day I was sitting there joking around with him in the afternoon. And I go, do you watch them? He goes, you can tell pretty quick if someone's a hack or not. Once in a while, we'll watch a few. And so I gave him shit for even saying that. Like, you don't even give him I start putting them in. I can't tell you how fast they came out.
First of all, he still had the machine. He still had the VHS machine.
If you need to watch that tape or not. I couldn't believe how fast I became the thing that I complained about on the other side. So
how many of your VHS tapes were sitting in his office? Did you?
It's funny. I think he had one or two in there still from like because I got in from a guest set, which is more of the natural path. I would actually, to tell you how crazy I was, I stopped into Minneapolis on my way to a gig that I was driving from Atlanta to.
Just on the way.
I was on my way to North Dakota, and I plotted it out that I stopped and did guest sets along the way. That's how committed I was at the time.
Holy shit. Yeah, that's crazy. I never saved the VHS tapes. So, and I see Joel Pace is watching right here, and he the wall of shame. He said he still has it. So
that's great.
So I cleaned out my office years ago of all that shit. But ironically, just like 2 weeks ago, I got a text from Roy Wood Jr. and he goes, "Hey, do you have like the old tapes?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, like I wanted to like." He was looking for one comedian specific reel from like 10 years ago. I'm like, what the fuck? Like so random. I guess said comedian accused Roy of stealing material or whatever.
Oh, he's looking for a tape of himself?
So no, he was looking for a tape of this guy. He said he's been doing this bit since whatever. So he's like, hey, do you save tapes from old submissions? I'm like, no. So he wanted just a cross-reference.
People do. I bet he found it somewhere.
I bet he did. I mean, holy shit. It wasn't for me, though. I remember just loading up the dumpster. But I had my, because remember when like CDs came out, I was like, oh man, these are so much thinner. It doesn't take up as much space. And
right.
Or just, I guess the CD-ROMs where you can throw a video, on it instead of the VHS. Holy shit. Those are the days.
Those were the days.
I remember going to NACA conferences and we'd have to make all those copies. We'd have those dual VHS copiers, and I would just shell them out, and like every say it's an hour and a half reel, I would just go back in the office and do another one, and holy shit, and then we have to carry a box like, oh man.
When I moved to LA, I lived in the Valley, and my tape duplicator company, about 90% of their business was adult films. And so I would go in there, and I had this because I would go every 6 months and do another 50 tapes with them, some tape that I got from Charlie Goodnight's or whatever. And the woman who ran the thing was so cool. She would throw in a handful of the leftover porn films from the prior order as like a gift to me.
So like a runoff copy is like, hey,
in an era where porn was hard to come by. Remember that?
Right.
Remember when it was hard to get porn?
Oh,
you had
absolutely.
to buy it or find it or be bequeathed it from an dead uncle or something?
I remember the first time my buddy Scott Nishik got a computer in college, and this is like 92-ish, and he's like the first guy that had a full computer, big screen, and then he's like, man, we can look at porn. Like, all right, cool. And like you download it, and then you have to come back in like an hour because it's like slowly the JPEG just slowly unveiling the picture.
I used to do a joke about that. I just remember, see if I can pull it out of my ass. It's if you try to watch porn on dial-up, it's actually faster to date a woman and ask for her hand in marriage.
Yeah. That doesn't. Yeah, these kids today. They
get
it so easy with their
easy free porn,
with their porn hub stuff, whatever the go-to is these days. So anyways, where do we segue from that?
Oh yeah, I got another story. I got a pants story.
Perfect.
The only pants story that I have even close to your pants story is one time I was Tom Ryan. Remember Tom Ryan?
Yeah.
Out of South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
He used to live in. His manager was Bill Hicks' girlfriend. And so there was a window there where she was also his landlord. Like he lived in the apartment and they were buddies and there was this crazy thing. And so we were talking about Hicks one day and he goes, blah, blah, blah. We're exchanging stories. He had all these great stories about Hicks in the early days. They were kind of friends. And he pauses and he goes, these are his pants. He was wearing pants that had been bequeathed to him by Hicks's girlfriend.
Oh my goodness.
When she cleaned out the place or whatever. And he would wear them kind of fondly, because he was a big fan. Tom never said fuck on stage ever once. He was a totally different style of comic, but he was still a fan of lots of different kinds of comedy and he loved Hicks.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
So he still wore his pants.
I bet he still has those pants.
I bet he does.
Yeah. I'll throw away some VHS tapes, but I would hold on to those pants.
Right. You still got pants from the biggest name in comedy here 25 years later.
I always thought that about you too with your name, COSTAKI ECONOMOPOULOS. I was like, I remember you would call, and the poor lady that at the front of the desk who had to write it down, she was just like she would just COSTAKI, like she's not even gonna try.
I didn't even write it on the thing on the screen. I just put COSTAKI.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. You just get winded.
You get the idea. You know how I am.
So So did you ever think of just going by COSTAKI, as a stage name?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with this name, when you're starting out, everyone tells you to change it at the beginning always, and I just thought it was fun. It's my real name. I didn't make it up. And again, there are some styles, like if you're doing a character or some wacky thing, it's totally acceptable not to. But for most comics, part of the goal is to reveal yourself and be the most you on stage. It just seemed weird to start with a fake name. Like intellectually, it just didn't feel right to me.
Well, a lot of people are doing it now. Like, I mean, Sebastian Maniscalco, I think he's kind of shifting towards just Sebastian, and Elijah Schlesinger is for sure going just by Elijah now.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. So
that's
at least that's what they're trying in the branding aspect of it. But
I get it.
Yeah, I get it too.
Especially in a modern world where things are complicated and your whole goal is to have a nice, sleek line to your brand. I get it. I understand. Yeah. And in the old days, I wrote for BET for a couple seasons.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wrote for Ricky Smiley, essentially, and when he was the host. And that year, they taped all the specials in Atlanta. People don't know this. At the time, Comic View was their highest rated show on the network. It was their flagship show. And so they would tape like 350 comics in about a month. They would do sometimes 3, 4, 5 shows in a day of several comics each and get all these into a can. And then they would show them over the course of that year on Comic View. And so we would come in and look at the lineup of the comics. And the black comics at the time were hilarious. None of them used their real names.
Oh, yeah. I used to laugh at all those names too, like Cool Bubba Ice and
I mean, not every name, but
ice cream and
85% of the names in that era on those lineups were Snow Cone and Samoa, and they were all not their real names, and some of them were one word.
Some more.
Earthquake was kind of a buddy of mine as an Atlanta guy.
Small Fry.
He hung in there with that.
Now my brain is going towards all those old
Shorty. Shorty was a big Atlanta guy for a long time.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah. Were you the only white writer on that show?
It was me and Tom Simmons.
Okay.
Like Gary Abdo. Remember Gary?
That name.
Gary Abdo. He used to own and run Uptown Comedy Corner in Atlanta, and then he booked some one-nighters around Holiday Inns all over the South. But he probably competed with you guys back in the day.
Yeah.
And that was actually one of my transitional jobs. I used to do cold calls to the Macon Holiday Inn. Food and beverage manager or whatever. And that's the only time in my life I used a fake name. I went by criss-crossing just because it was too hard to fucking explain my name. And during a cold call to pitch comedy nights, to the Valdosta Ramada Inn. Like I didn't want to get into a conversation about my name.
I know a Mark Poulos in Minneapolis. You know him? He's
Mark Poulos. Yeah.
He's a very funny guy.
That's a shortened name. That's not his real name.
Yeah, correct. I can't say it starts with a K and then it's got a lot of O's and U's in it.
Right, of course. Yeah, that's how we do.
So how do you like being back at your old hood at your parents' place? Is that weird?
I love it. It's totally weird, but it's also it's occasionally challenging to share a space with your mother, and for my wife to share a space with her mother-in-law. And we sometimes go to Florida to do the opposite, stay with her mother for a little while. We're just on an extended trip to because both of our mothers live in the South. We live in LA, and they were completely alone. And we've got a 2-year-old grandchild, and we were paying LA rent to be in LA when it's closed.
Right. Yeah.
So we just put our stuff in a pod and we came for a few months. So we're just on an extended trip.
I know a lot of comedians that are no longer just hanging out in LA for that same reason. Like it's so expensive. Just go back home and just chill for a while and regroup and then, and especially with your mom probably loving the
it's weird how much we all love it. It's been so
grandmother
fun.
time,
it's been really great. My mom she's worked so hard to do all the details and be helpful. She's awesome. She's amazing.
Is your 2-year-old a boy or a girl?
Little girl, Zoe.
Little girl. Yeah, so she's probably just loving, just hugging on her every day. So
yeah, and both places have kind of fun stuff. My mom lives kind of near a lake, and so there's a playground, and we go do all this. We can drive to a little place that has a place where you feed goats, and the other grandma has pool and a beach and a very Florida kind of vibe, and so it's nice to have two worlds to kind of bounce back and forth between.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Fun fact: I was born in Marietta, Georgia.
What? I didn't know that.
True story. I was there for about 6 months, and I was a Navy brat. Moved all over the world after that, but But yeah, that's and I've never been. I know you're big into sports, but and I'm not. But if I ever pull for anybody, it's usually Atlanta, just because.
Wow, you need a hug.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's why I never really got into sports.
Yeah, I get it. I wish I had followed your lead.
Nice. So I do have another Kostaki story that I things. I mean, I'm sure you when you hear about other comedians or agents or whatever, you have a story that pops in your head. I don't know if you have any Chuck Johnson stories, whatever, but this is one that I do remember vividly of you, and it's do you know where I'm going with this?
I don't. I was just thinking of my own story.
All right. I'll let you tell your story first, and then if you have a story about
Mine's
Chuck
not
Johnson.
really about you. It's about the Comedy Zone in Charlotte, which was kind of your flagship home for a while.
Hey, well, yeah, Joel's on here too. He's listening, so it's one big old Comedy Zone family. So
it requires a little bit of naming names to get the full joy of the story.
Hey, I don't care.
Okay,
I'm an open book. I don't care about
anybody else. Either. She was awful to me, and this is people should know. Comics as a group are some of the smartest, funniest, most generous, great souls. Like 99% of the comics I love. And part of the reason this story sticks with me is because it was such a jarring surprise to work with a comic who is so fucking terrible to me.
Yes. Here we go. This is really what I've waited 20 weeks to really get into a good podcast.
I didn't plan to tell this story, but I will. I'm not afraid.
Go ahead. That's why I'm here.
I was booked to MC the Charlotte Comedy Zone. The headliner was Diane Ford.
Okay.
So I come in. Talking to the middle act, who was some big city comic who was a little bit fish out of water. I don't remember his name, but he was a writer-ish type, and I was a writer-ish type from Atlanta. So I'm standing there chatting with him, and Diane Ford walks up to me and goes, "Don't say this, don't do that, do it this way. When you introduce me, she literally, she didn't say hi to me. She literally didn't, and I go, "Hi, I'm Kostaki." She didn't laugh at that.
How long were you in the business at this point?
I was pretty green. It's possible I went there a little bit overqualified, but probably not. I was an MC.
Yeah. It was probably right after I got those pants.
That's right. Yeah,
we got to get him in there. He's got
put
me
him in the
pants.
good room. He, you know.
I mean, I had this Lecoq Sportif matching pants and jacket. I got to get him in there.
Poor kid just got back from Jasper, Alabama, or some godforsaken gig. Put him in the good club. Yeah, probably. So she was really weird to me, like immediately for no reason. Like I didn't even know her. I never met her. She didn't say hi to me. She just started telling me things I needed to do, which again, people who are watching may not know. That's not really her place. I mean, you want to make a pleasant request for something, fine. So go on stage. I'm pretty clean. I'm pretty clean anyway. Yeah. The middle's pretty clean, whatever. She complains about something I said. I think I said the word vagina at some point. I did a thing. My rule at the time was if someone asked me to be clean, I do what I could do on Conan O'Brien. That was it was like adult, but not, no language. She didn't think the vagina chunk was acceptable, whatever. So we debated a little bit. I decide, all right, I won't do it. And literally the next show, she says the word cunt in the first 20 seconds of her act. And that's not an exaggeration. And again, it's fine by me, but you can't tell the other people on the show to be clean when you open with cunt. That's not fair. That's not a reasonable request.
I've heard that story, not from her, but from so many comedians and time, from years past. And do you think it's just because if you were going to throw that, out there in the comedy universe on stage, that you just want to be the first person for the shock value, and that's why you don't want anybody? I mean, that's a serious question, because I hear that a lot of like dirty comedians that don't want anybody to do anything dirty in front of them, just to kind of, sucker punch them with the vulgarities out of the gate.
That's part of it. But I'll go one step deeper. Yes, the answer to that is yes, but it's one step deeper than that. Being funny is very hard to follow. And being dirty makes it easier to be funny in most American comedy clubs. So they can't tell you not to be funny, but they could tell you, don't say this or that. And it makes it harder to be funny. Hilarious and clean is very hard to follow too.
Right.
But dirty and hilarious is even harder. So it's just the one thing that you could say to try to dampen down the heat you're getting from the thing in front of you, especially when you're old and bitter and haven't worked on your act in 20 years, for instance, Diane Ford. So Diane Ford, I think, has the chops to be great, but she's
trying to get into the podcast right now. Hold on. That's
right. Yeah. Come on in. Let's talk it through. But she wasn't working. She didn't care, and she was dead inside. She wasn't a good comic at that time. That doesn't mean that she wasn't before then or wouldn't be since, but that week she wasn't good, and she was leaning on all these crazy rules to try to survive. And so I was newish to comedy, and I was fascinated by this, and I was literally debating whether or not it was the job of the two comics in front of the headliner to set up the show for them, or if it was the job of every comic to do their best them and for the show to be a mosaic of different things. And I was having this discussion with Diane on the way home in the car. I was giving her a ride to the condo.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And because I'm like a thoughtful, interested comedy nerd. I wanted to talk this through with her.
You're like a sponge, just soak it all up. And
I was young and I was interested. I wasn't combative. I was interested in hearing what she had to say. And at one point, I said the phrase, well, it's not like you're Brian Regan up there. And she made me stop the car, and she got out and walked the rest of the way. Yeah, she didn't want to talk to me anymore.
How far of a walk did she have to go?
It was several hundred yards, and I pulled up alongside. I go, well, come on, we're just having a conversation. No, she shut me down. And for the rest of the weekend, I would introduce her and walk off stage one direction, and she would come on the other way.
I was about to ask, what day of the week was it?
She didn't talk to me the rest of the time. And she tried to get me fired. And to your credit, the Comedy Zone had dealt with her being difficult before and told her that they would not be firing me. Nice. So you guys had my back, which totally shocked me. I just expected to be fired after that.
Well, yeah. Unfortunately, in this business, there's a lot of prima donnas, and we have to deal with them accordingly. And I always, especially once I kind of, when I started my own company and went a lot more towards the college market, that was the first thing. Like, I don't need drama. Because I dealt with so many people in the club market in that aspect, and I was like, man, that's too much. There's too many other good comics that are nice and mail me gifts that I don't need.
Right.
To,
of course. I mean, that's the thing.
Headaches, so.
Why would you? It's amazing to me that a comic who's a giant pain in the ass could even continue to work. There's so many nice guys who are hilarious that you've never heard of. There's a sea of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's thousands of them. So.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good story. So have you talked to her ever since then?
I've never seen her since. I'm not still mad about it, but I do think that she should be called out if someone's going to ask me to tell a story. I'm not ashamed to.
Yeah.
It's her fault. She was awful to me.
Wait, Joel said something else. Hold on. That was a week I screwed up with his name, bringing him up from the back of the room. Please welcome your host, COSTAKI ECONOMOPOULOS something.
Yeah, see, that's not memorable to me because that happened 1,000 times.
ECONOMOPOULOS something. Maybe that's your new stage name. ECONOMOPOULOS something.
Every version. I had to write a good joke about the guy just screwing up my name because
economics.
80% of the time.
COSTAKI economics.
Yeah.
I don't know.
My favorite.
All right, so my story with you, I still feel it in my comedy heart. It was I had started Summit Comedy in '98, so it was pretty fresh after that. So I want to say 99, 2000 tops, and I got involved with this shady promoter in Vegas, and here we go, and it was going well for about 8 weeks or so.
I forgot this. I remember this very well.
And then
now.
Let's just say it's the 9th week. So the 9th week, there was a glitch in the matrix. Something, but he wasn't returning my calls or emails or whatever it was. And then I got a phone call from the I guess the entertainment director at the casino, who I had never spoken with. And that was an error early on in my comedy career. Like, hey, you can't just talk to one person. You got to get your hands involved in everybody and make sure this is a legitimate operation. Because I was just dealing with this guy, and I had booked you for this casino. And when you showed up, they said, there's no more comedy here.
We did one show.
Okay, you did
We did one show, and then they canceled the whole club.
I do remember this, and hold on. And okay, Mark Evans is watching now too. Mark, can you remember the guy's name? I want to say his name was Robert Burke. If that's the name, I can't remember.
It could be.
Put it in the comments if so. Holy shit! First of all, I felt so bad, and I can't remember the feature you had with you, but I do remember it was you. And you were both there, and I guess the deal was that guy said, "Well, if we'll do a show if COSTAKI can get people in here." So I remember telling you, like, "All right, well, I guess you have to just go like busk on the pavement and try and get people in there."
I think it's been a long time ago, but if I remember right, we're the ones who pitched that to him. Like,
it's quite possible, yeah.
He said, "Well, the promotion isn't working. I can't get anybody in here." And I go, "Look, we have a contract. You're supposed to pay me X, and we're supposed to do this. I flew. I had opportunity costs. I'm here. What are you talking about? You can't not do a show tomorrow." So we had this big conversation, and I understand that comedy is a delicate craft, and sometimes things get fucked up. And I wasn't a child at that point. I was a jaded old grown up, running around telling jokes. And I was like, "Look, we're willing to try to figure something out and help you if you want." And somewhere in that conversation, they got angry and kicked us out of the hotel. They wouldn't even let us sleep there.
Yeah,
I had friends coming in from out of town to like run around in Vegas and like gamble, and I was going to tell jokes, and we were going to go play poker, and we had this whole thing set up.
Yeah. Did you stay the rest of the week or no?
We actually had one of those like movie scenes where I was in a poker room and got a message on my phone that we were kicked out of the hotel, and we ran to the other casino that we weren't in to get our shit because we thought it was going to be gone. It got ugly where the guy was furious at me, and I'm like, I didn't even know the deal. I'm just a comic who came here to tell jokes.
Right, the shit rolls downhill.
I'm not even part of the business situation that's happening around me.
Well, that's the thing. Again, I wasn't aware of this guy until that first conversation, and it was not a pleasant one. And the unfortunate thing, it was Robert Burke, and unfortunately, Robert Burke was stealing from them as well. Maybe not stealing. He had never paid them, I guess, the outstanding monies due to them. So therefore, they were quite upset with him, then upset with you, and then talking to me, who they didn't know me from Adam, and they're like, "You're dead to me." But the long story short is I told you that I would pay you regardless, and I did pay you out of my pocket. And the thing is, I didn't have $1,200. I was so broke just starting my company. I mean, I was literally like I had 2 nickels rubbed together, and I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
I was like, where the hell am I going to get $1,200? I mean, to give you. But I made I made true to my word, and I paid you.
You did. And the reason that we landed on that is because we did some other thing like the year prior that fell through. And generally when things fall through, everyone shrugs and is sad, and then you swallow hard and you move on.
Yeah.
And so it was the second thing that we had booked together that fell through. And this time it wasn't like it fell through in a few weeks or whatever. I had already done a show, and then the thing was canceled for the rest of the week. So it was extra insane for them to decide they weren't paying anybody.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it still makes, again, my comedy heart hurt on that, because that was the biggest burn in my entire career. And unfortunately, it screwed over so many comedians because, not only you, I mean, but everybody else was booked for the next 6-8 weeks or whatever, gingerly trying to get them all taken care of. And even the weeks before where he would, we didn't find out that he was bouncing the checks. So then those comedians were screwed. And
that's crazy.
I think a lot of them still got paid though. It took a long time, but they sued the fella, and it went through the.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it went through the I guess whatever the county is there, and they filed I guess if you bounce a check over $500, it's a felony. So they.
Can you imagine how often that happens in Las Vegas?
Right. But they did get paid.
It's someone's job to keep up with all that shit.
Yeah. Mark Evans says he got paid 3 years later.
What?
Yeah. He was a part of it. I remember Jesse Campbell, Pat Godwin was another one. Those are the ones that just kind of come to my name, come to my brain right now. But holy shit! But again, that was just a time in my business where I was like, you know what? And that's where I was like, I can't do this. Like this whole club market shit. Like I can't deal with the headaches. So it's switched
such a challenge, man.
More to the corporate and the colleges where that shit doesn't happen. So,
right. See now, because of my exposure on Bob and Tom, I have become sort of like a low rent. Trying to think of somebody who does this sort of thing a lot. Stanhope. I'm sort of a low rent Stanhope where I go into band bars and build my own shows a lot. Yeah. And sometimes, in fact, that's the shirt I'm wearing. This was a great bar that I worked in. It's the second oldest brewery in all of the country. Nice. Terre Haute Brewing Company is a great music venue. So I think I was
supposed to be in Terre Haute this weekend or one of these weekends.
Oh, really?
NACA this season. NACA, I guess whatever the Mid-America was in Terre Haute. And I'd never been to Indiana. It's one of the few states I've never been to. For whatever reason, I've never been.
Indiana, you've never been to? That's crazy as a comedy booker.
I'm only missing 5 states, and Indiana's one of them. So
that's random.
So
now this place is great, but not all places are. I mean, no one knows better than you do. The people who own bars are not, as a group, the best, the most stable. Have their shit together. Right. People. And so, it's very labor intensive. And very often when you get to the thing, you're like, there's some XYZ. And you're like, well, we agreed on XYZ. Why isn't X happening? And you have to have this whole conversation about straightening it out.
It's now just Z. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Z. Good luck. Yeah, that's right.
You might get a portion of what you were told that you're going to get paid, and you might
Yeah.
get paid in drugs. You never
Now,
know.
actually, I've been lucky, and I also am in a situation where I usually use the radio station as a little triangle with the venue, and so all of the parties are driven to please the other parties because of the Bob and Tom connection. So
Right.
usually I'm safe from getting completely screwed, but there's details that fall through the cracks. I've actually been lucky. I've only been totally screwed like maybe 2 times in 26 years of full-time comedy.
Tell those stories now. Do you
Oh,
remember
yeah.
those stories?
One was a club
ripping off old Band-Aids.
The only big one was a club that was it was a brand new club that went under like between my week and the next week, and they just never sent the check that they were going to send. They just disappeared into the ether. It was a little club that just disappeared. And I talked to a lawyer friend. He's like, well, you can, yeah, you can spend the next few years trying to get your $1,900 or whatever.
Unfortunately, that's the thing in this business. You're going to spend $2,500 to get $500 or whatever.
Right.
It's like most of the time the cost for going down that path costs twice as much of what you would even get out of it. So
and it's like, a little right. That's right. And it's like my dad.
They know that probably. That's why probably why they're like, screw that guy.
So it's either A, they know that and they're leveraging that against you ever coming, or B, they lost 50,000 and can't possibly pay you the 1,700. Yeah. And that's why we're in this spot in the first place. So you can't squeeze blood out of a rock.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like the restaurant business, but worse. It seems like a sexy thing, but if you go into it not knowing what you're doing, you can lose a lot of money in the blink of an eye, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine. So dealing with those people it's really fun over the last 20 something years.
Yeah, right.
So all right, so tell the audience a little bit about so Bob and Tom. You're a regular on Bob and Tom. How did that become such a cush gig for you?
Oh, it's been great. They changed my career. The only thing I ever wanted was to go places and for people to buy tickets to come see me on purpose. And, I'm not a big star or anything, but I am on that ladder, and it changes everything. If you can draw some people to come see you, it doesn't have to be 1,000, but if it's, you got 200 people there when it would have been 17, it changes everything. Or even if it's 80 and 42 of them came to see you, it changes everything. So creatively, you can do anything you want when they come and they know and like you before you start. And of course, all of the other details are improved too. You work better venues, and the money's better, and the hotel's better, and the setup's better, and the sound is better, and the crowds are smarter, and so yeah, basically I did exactly what comics do when they're new to Bob and Tom. I was the middle act at Crackers in Indianapolis, and they would have me in for 10 minutes at the end of the morning after the headliners were on, and I didn't suck. And then they would have me in eventually when I was a headliner, and eventually I did the show so many times in the recent year or two that I basically didn't have any good jokes left that they hadn't heard, and I was kind of panicked. And I used to write for the Complete Sheet, which was a prep service. For people who don't know, radio stations get this prep service. It's like a 50-page document every morning that has urban music news and black music news, and these are the birthdays, and these are some caller ID ideas, and they had a section with topical jokes in it that I used to write for. Okay. So I did a segment on their show called Topical Sounding Jokes. These are jokes that sound like they're from this week but aren't. So it's kind of a funny.
So you
gag.
Created that.
I just made it up as a panic because I'd done all my good jokes as an excuse to do 20 of my favorite jokes from the Complete Sheet from the prior year. So it was all things that were a little bit evergreen, like Pac-Man turned 30. That's a long time to be chased by little demons. Just ask Robert Downey Jr. It was all like, it was 20 of those.
I giggled.
Yeah, right. And yeah, because I wrote, 1,500 and I picked the 20 good ones.
Yeah.
So the stars aligned, and it killed. They loved it and couldn't wait, and they got like a rim shot machine, and they would come back from a break and go, get another one of those topical sounding jokes, and I would do a couple, and they laughed, and they would go on to another segment. So after the show, Tom pulls me aside and he goes, do you think you could do that every week? And I said, yes, I can. And of course I could not, but I didn't say that.
Any comedian always says, of course.
Yes, please always say yes.
Do you have an hour? Of course.
I'll figure it out later. Now that I've never done, but I understand the motivation.
The last like 2 comedians I've had on here, I've had that scenario. Do you have an hour? Of course I do. And they didn't at the time.
Oh, so, right. I was always the opposite. I was always the last one anyone bumped up. So I always had way more than I was doing at the time.
Well, that's good.
So they were very generous, and they let me figure out what the segment was. It was like a running gag on the show that I didn't know exactly what it was, and I would try a different style of thing every time. One time I did true stories, and one time I did Karnak style jokes, and one time I did, it slowly became the monologue. Okay. And so every week was a different subject. I would do anything that had bullet points. Like phobias. Was
this a set thing like every Monday or every Tuesday type stuff?
Yeah, every Wednesday at 8:20 I would call and do the monologue.
Nice.
And so it was phobias, it was weird sports traditions, it was Halloween, whatever. And it was just a writing exercise. Can I write 12 good jokes about phobias? And the answer was surprisingly yes. So
did you ever have to get help from your other comedy friends?
Yes, mostly Tom Simmons.
I've got 6. Tom, hook me up.
Tom Simmons saved my ass over and over and over, and we would work together. Guy. We would work on the jokes, and I would run them in the clubs and polish them up and get them ready to go. And it was like this crazy cycle every week. It was a race to Wednesday morning.
That's awesome.
So then eventually that worked so well. I was starting to sell some tickets in Funny Bones and places, and I thought, I want to do this, but more. So I pitched the all NFL topical joke version to sports radio. And while I was doing that, and sports radio was telling me, nah, we don't do that, Bob and Tom liked that even more than the other thing I was doing. So it became an all NFL joke segment. And that's what I still do. Every Tuesday morning, I call them and wrap up the weekend that was in the NFL.
Wow. That's
crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah. They've been great to me.
Now, do you get paid now, and did you get paid before, or was there for doing the call-in things, or is that, or is it kind of like the piggybackness of going out and doing the Bob and Tom comedy tours?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the original model was to do the show almost the same way that Brad Pitt does the Tonight Show. It's not for the $900; it's for the exposure for the movie, right?
Right.
It's the same model. It's the main thrust of what you're doing it for is to go sell tickets in Terre Haute. Because now I've been on the show more weeks than not for 12 years. And now when I go to Boise, people know who I am, and that's worth a lot. So it's really changed my career in that way. And then in the most recent years, the past few years, I syndicated it, and I have several other places that I call. I call Buffalo and Albuquerque and Kansas City and Minneapolis. And so then I'm kind of building this football brand. And just this week, I launched All Pro Lines, which is, soon to be the best football comedy brand on the internet.
That's awesome.
Just starting it. But it's been fun.
So when you say those other markets, are those non-Bob and Tom markets that you're syndicated out to as well? Yeah,
originally I went to non-Bob and Tom markets. And then it became a big pain in the ass for the syndicator to go, well, we can do this any city in the country except for these 117 cities that you want to sell it in. So yes, for the most part, the cities that don't have Bob and Tom are the ones that want it because it's not already associated with something in their market. So it ends up being kind of a natural thing that it falls to the other markets.
Okay.
But I have done it in the afternoons at some Bob and Tom markets and some places that have been great to me.
I'm familiar with Bob and Tom. They were in Charlotte at one point in time, but they didn't last too long. I don't know what happened there, but I know throughout the Midwest it's huge.
Right.
So if you're listening, that's kind of where they're out of Indy, right?
They're out of Indy, and it's like anything. There are some places where they're barely heard of, And there are some places where they are gigantic gods. I mean, that people have been listening for 30 years, and it's their tradition in the morning to listen to those guys on the way to work.
Yeah, like in Charlotte's John Boy and Billy. I mean,
right.
for the Southern crowd. And such.
Yeah, John Boy and Billy, they're in about 70-something cities all over the place. So it's a similar concept. They're the Midwest version of John Boy and Billy. But like John Boy and Billy, they've reached out beyond the Midwest. They're huge in Medford, Oregon. They're big in Idaho. So it just, it's like anything. It depends how it lands and how it's sort of embraced.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, but that show is now just Bob or Tom, right? One of them has left.
Yeah, Bob retired, but they kept the branding.
Okay.
And people always ask me about that. And the most hilarious example of that is a guy named Kid Kradich, who had a big radio show in Texas. He died, and the Kid Kradich show continues on. He's not even, that's one guy's name.
It's like, Tom joined a radio show and like, oh, no, he's dead. No, he's not dead, but he's retired. But yeah, it'd be like carrying that torch, I guess. That'd be hard. Imagine getting that gig. Like, hey, you going in a radio and then hey, here's the deal. You're gonna DJ and you're gonna come into this show and you're gonna, on the heels of this guy.
Yeah, it's funny, but they had an actual business decision to make, and they decided to keep the branding because it takes you 30 years to build a brand that strong. You don't want to just go, oh, it's the Tom show now, and restart the whole. I get it. The show obviously became more than just Bob and Tom. Chick McGee's a big part of it, and they've got other voices on the show. And
Christy Lee, right?
Christy Lee's been there 30 years.
She left and came back, if I remember correctly.
She was gone about 6 months, somewhere in there. Okay. Yep.
I thought it was longer. But,
and of course, Bob is still on in bits that they still play and comes in and does Race Week, and he loves doing a couple of their big special events, and he'll occasionally come in and co-host when somebody's out. So he's still there a little bit. Bob's great.
Yeah, I know a lot of comedians still, are still, I don't want to say riding those coattails, but definitely they have put a lot of comedians on the map.
Sure.
Pat Godwin's doing stuff with them still, I believe.
Yeah, he's there daily now. He graduated into a whole full-time gig-ish,
nice. Yeah, they were really big on the music comedy, if I remember correctly. So,
it's easy. Music comedy is easier to enjoy over and over again.
Right, especially obviously being a music radio station, so they kind of would blend the two a lot easier that way too.
But they have a non-song format. They're all talk in the mornings. There aren't many places that do just comedy and talk. Yeah. So they sort of set themselves apart, and they've had a hell of a run. They were on the vanguard of that syndication wave, 15 years ago ish.
Yeah. I can't think of besides them and John Boy and Billy and a few others. I can't think of any other ones that are out there like that in that syndicated world. So. There's
a few, but they're the giants of that ilk. Yeah.
Have you tried to get in with those other ones with your sports?
A little bit, but I stopped trying so hard because there's overlap, and you don't want to sort of bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you start looking at the map of the places where beer and hot wings are being played in the mornings, there's a lot of Bob and Tom markets. So not only would it aggravate the Bob and Tom universe, but the beer and hot wings universe doesn't want to have some. So it just becomes like, I'll go call Buffalo where neither of those guys are.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're doing okay with the work opportunities that they have given you. So
they've been great. They've completely changed my existence. I owe them everything, and they're fun and they're generous. They know what they're doing. That's another thing. You've been in the business a long time. Some morning radio people don't know what to do with a comedian. It scares the hell out of them.
Right. They don't know how to set up the jokes or whatever.
They don't know how to come in and out. They don't know when to give space. They don't know when to jump in.
Step on your jokes, etc. Yeah.
They're good at some parts of being DJs, but not interviewing. Or even worse, this is another classic archetype. They're threatened by comics and stomp on you and don't let you be funny on their show.
Yeah.
So there's lots of types that are out there that aren't
the prima donnas. Those are the prima donnas that don't.
They're not a good match.
Don't take my star quality away.
Right. They're not a good match for having a comic on. And most of them are nice guys that just are terrified by talking to a comic, because it is scary, because they could take over your show. They could be terrible and not funny. You could set them up and then it just lays there. I understand that having a comic on is absolutely a challenge.
Yeah, I think Diane Ford's trying to get a syndicated show. She's gonna have you on first guest.
Tell her I have a story I'd like to share. She wouldn't even remember that. She was probably like that to 100 guys.
Yeah, it was just her routine. So
yeah,
dude, man. Well, it was so good chatting with you and catching up with you, man. It's been too long since we chatted. So
what a pleasure.
Yeah, man. Man,
thanks for paying me.
That hour. Yes, you're absolutely welcome.
Seriously, that's a legit thank you because you got screwed too. I mean, we were all victims in this crazy situation.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for. You always made me look good anytime I booked you. So I appreciate you. So
that's kind. You should know. To wrap up that story, I took the money that I thought I was going to get eventually and paid for the hotel. And my friends and I went down the street and stayed there the whole weekend as planned. I just didn't come home with any money at the end.
Well, but maybe you won something at the craps table or something.
Yeah, right. Probably won some money at the poker table. I don't know.
That's awesome, man. Well, so do you have? Go ahead and plug all your stuff with your podcast and your new sports show and such.
Yeah, well, I'm on Bob and Tom every week, wrapping up the weekend that was. But my two big plugs are All Pro Lines. I literally got the URL and the main name on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter in the last week.
Nice.
And I did a title search and I talked to my lawyer and he said, just start the damn thing. So I did. I put together some sort of hold the place logos and I spent all weekend writing and going bananas online. So come find me, All Pro Lines. allprolines.com I own, but there's nothing there yet. But
I just bought .net.
That's
and
funny.
.crypto. Sorry.
No one will ever look at that. You can have that one. So come join me on All Pro Lines, and the podcast is called Quick Snaps, and that's every week during the football season and about once a month in the off season. All these things are free. They're just football. They're places to engage with football comedy. Come find me.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you very much, Kostaki. Good luck getting through all this COVID mess, and we'll see you on the other side of everything.
Thanks so much, man. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
All right, man. Deuces. All right, everybody, we'll see you next week. If you need a comedian for anything, if you need to book Kostaki for anything, go to summitcomedy.com, and we'll see you next week. Later.